Hey moneymakers, I'm Kalilah Reynolds and welcome to Taking Stock. I'm all gold and glamorous today. Do you smell the money? Smell the money. Well, we have another great show for you today, but before we get into the details, let me ask you, are you subscribed to my newsletter yet? If not, head over to KalilahReynolds.com and get on that email list. I have some exclusive content dropping there soon. Now come on, let's get this money.
First up, Jamaica wants to become the Caribbean's next cruise ship home port. That means visitors from around the world will come here to board their cruises. We'll get an update from Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett.
Is there a date yet for Jamaica to receive its first cruise ship?
Well, the hope is for August 1 date.
And later, the analysts weigh in on the latest market developments. Fesco has officially listed on the junior market. How are investors reacting?
Normally for these small upticks, we find that the stock price does skyrocket, especially within the first 2 to 3 days.
And US President Joe Biden is looking to tax capital gains at nearly 40%. How is that affecting US stocks?
You saw a bit of downs in the last 2 weeks. However, if you look at just this week alone, it's just been very exciting.
We'll discuss.
But first, here's What's Hot, brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers, your best interest at heart.
Future energy source company Fesco has become the first fuel distribution company to list on the Jamaica Stock Exchange JSE. The company listed on Friday and is also the first junior market company to be added since the start of the year. Fesco opened at 80 cents and was up 32% by the end of Friday's trading, closing at $1.06. The listing comes less than a month after the company's IPO closed early due to oversubscription. According to JSE Managing Director Marlene Street Forrest, Fesco now has 4,495 shareholders. The company raised $400 million from the IPO. This brings the overall capital raised by companies on the market to $12.6 billion. The listing brought the JSE's overall market capitalization to $1.73 trillion at the start of Friday. And speaking of listings, Guardian Holdings Limited GHL is expected to list by introduction by May 5. The listing comes after a 7-year hiatus from the JSE. Listing by introduction is a way of listing shares without raising new capital. It provides existing shareholders with a ready market to sell or buy shares. GHL is already listed on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange. GHL had signaled its intention to cross-list its ordinary shares on the JSE from March. According to the JSE rules, a company listing by introduction must publish an abridged statement no later than a week after approval by the JSE. Listing would then be done within 14 days after the abridged statement's publication. That statement was published on the JSE's website on April 13. The listing price of its shares in Jamaican dollar terms are not yet known. Business and consumer confidence fell between January and March. That's according to the latest survey commissioned by the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce. However, the outlook is brighter for the next quarter, April to June, with the expectation that Jamaica's COVID-19 vaccination program will benefit businesses and consumers in the coming months. For the first quarter, consumer confidence fell by 10 points, while business confidence dipped by 13 points. In the meantime, businesses and consumers generally expect the economy to get better in a year, but that optimism is counterbalanced by fears about the lingering effects of the pandemic, job losses, price increases, and crime. National Commercial Bank has launched its own prepaid MasterCard. The bank says the new MasterCard will open more opportunities for Jamaica's underbanked population. Anyone over 18 can get it. The MasterCard can be topped up at any NCB ABM via online banking or bank transfer. There is no joining, monthly or minimum balance fee. The card is compatible with Cirrus ABMs and is also enabled for Europay, MasterCard, Visa EMV. Meanwhile, Mailpack Group has also launched its own shopping prepaid MasterCard in partnership with ePayment Group. Sandals Resorts International will be adding 3 new hotels to its Jamaica portfolio. The development will see over 2,000 jobs created, as well as an additional 900 rooms. The 3 hotels will bring Sandals' hotel count in Jamaica to 14. The properties include the former Jewel Duns River in Ocho Rios and Jewel Runaway Bay Beach Resort and Water Park. The third hotel will be built on prime beachfront land next to Jewel Duns River. All three properties were acquired last year. Jewel Runaway Bay will be transformed and operated under the beach's brand, while Jewel Duns River will be upgraded and operated under its previous name, Sandals Duns River. The adjacent beachfront property will be developed and operated as Sandals Royal Duns River. Digicel Jamaica said it's added 50,000 new subscribers during the pandemic. CEO Jabor Kayamov says the increase in numbers is an indication of the high demand for quality service which his company is committed to delivering. The company is celebrating 20 years on the island. The CEO says to satisfy demand, Digicel will be rolling out more towers where it doesn't have coverage or where the signal is weak. Over the last 12 months, he says the company rolled out about 400 new sites for fixed LTE, especially in rural areas where the connectivity was not sufficient.
What's Hot was brought to you by Jamaica Money Market Brokers, your best interest at heart. And when we come back, we find out about the plans to have Jamaica become a Caribbean cruise ship home port. Hey moneymakers, you're not an official part of the family until you have your merch. Visit KalilahReynolds.com/store to order your t-shirt and your mask today. Let's get this money. This segment of Taking Stock is brought to you by Bulwark Insurance Agency, insurance made easy, and Massey United Insurance. How good is your insurance? Welcome back to Taking Stock. The tourism industry has been one of the worst hits by the global COVID-19 pandemic, but there are green shoots in the industry as the recovery begins. I'm joined now by Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett. Hi, Minister. Good to see you.
Very nice to see you too, Kalilah. It's been a little while since we've not had this engagement. I look forward to it, and here it is.
It has been a little while, and that's because tourism has been just dragging along, inching along over the past several months. Tourism having delivered a serious body blow to the industry. And you as minister, I'm sure you've had your hands full in trying to deal with all the repercussions of that, and right now trying to revive the industry. So give us the overview of where we are first. So a year after COVID, where is Jamaica's tourism industry now?
Well, a year after COVID, we have put in place strong and very, very valuable protocols that have served well to keep the spread as managed as it has been. We have also put in infrastructure that has enabled us to enable continued movement. And that's a good news, because Jamaica is one of the few countries in the world that, having opened our borders on the 15th of June, we have not closed it. So the COVID compliance strategies that we have engaged have worked and worked fairly well. So after a difficult 12 months, when we lost 130,000 jobs and some $2.5 billion in earnings of foreign exchange, and where tourism expenditure, and this is very important to note, because the expenditure we're talking about now is what really goes into the pockets of the people and goes to buy the goods and services here in Jamaica, of 154.7 billion Jamaican dollars. And that's a huge hit. Cruise tourism, for example, was at zero for a year, meaning no arrivals, no expenditure, no revenue. So since June, however, we have seen the slow but sure recovery. Last year, we ended with 484,000 visitors, and we earned just about $600 million. For the year so far, we have had 258,000 visitors, which is really still just about 55% of what we did at the similar time last year, and the earnings of just about $300 million. So that's where we are. But the jobs are slowly coming back, because we were down to 30,000 workers and we are now at 40.
What's the
And
procedure now to visit Jamaica? Is it still that you have to be tested before you come? What about vaccinations? Is there any requirement for people to be vaccinated, or is that being considered?
Well, the requirement is still for a negative test. Um, we insist on that. The vaccination issue is something that is emerging, and I think that as our key trading partner, the United States, UK, and so on, get more vaccinated, I think there's going to be a requirement for proof of vaccination. It's difficult to do that now, simply because so many of our partners are still not even off the blocks in terms of vaccination levels. So we know that biosanitary tools are going to play a vital role in safe tourism for the future, as long as I think the threat of COVID-19 persists. I would like to feel that the pandemic will disappear in short order as soon as we get a level of vaccination in the world that could signal that. And the WHO is looking hard at that. I just wanted to say, Kalilah, by way of information, that up to yesterday, 950 million doses of vaccine were administered across the world. And the news of interest in our side is that the US had gotten 1/5 of that.
Mm-hmm.
So the
It's
world,
encouraging.
yes, the world
So
is
approaching 1 billion, we have about 7 billion people in the world, so
that's
about
right.
1/7 of the
1/7
population.
of the world population is covered, let's say, now with at least the first dose.
Right.
The challenge is that it's probably going to take us 5 to 6 years at that rate to vaccinate 75 to 80% of the world. However,
That is a challenge. That's a long time.
It is a challenge. But for us, our big partners here, the United States is going at a very, very ambitious clip. And in fact, they, in 3 months from now, would have covered 75 to 80% of their population.
And that's our biggest tourism market.
And that's our biggest. So that augurs well for us in terms of. But we now have to step up our own vaccination rate and to get to the level
so that they can feel safe to come here.
Absolutely. And we are seeing that already in terms of the position that the CDC is taking with regards to travel advisories.
So are tourism workers among the priority to receive the vaccine then, in that case?
The tourism workers, if you notice, have now become part of the priority group. We had quite a blitz last weekend, as you know, and then nearly 5,000 tourism workers were vaccinated during that period. But of course, a number of them who fit the age cohort that were prioritized at the beginning got there. So at the moment, we can't say that the tourism workers are being vaccinated, and as the vaccination availability improves, more and more of them will be. And my hope is that by August of this year, we would have pretty much 20 to 30,000 tourism workers that would have been covered.
That would be what percentage?
That would still be a small, maybe that would be what, 10, 20, about 10%.
Of the tourism workers?
Yeah, I mean, well, 12, about 15% of the workers who are directly employed, not the indirect, because those indirect would have been covered in the broader vaccination. But those who we call direct workers, that's 170,000 who are working in hotels and so on and so forth across the island. We would have had about 15, maybe 20% of those done by August.
And I'm sure that the resort owners are not only on your case, but perhaps trying on their own to try to get their workers vaccinated too. It would be a badge in their, a feather in their cap to be able to advertise 100% of our workers are vaccinated.
Absolutely, but they have already offered. But the management of vaccination is not in the hands of the private sector.
Right.
It's essentially a public sector affair, and the WHO is the supreme controller. And everybody, especially us, sing from the holy grail of the WHO. So, we are guided indeed as to which vaccination we could actually buy, and even who you can buy from. And so, until there is a liberalization of that process, we're going to have to continue to vaccinate in relation to the availability through the public sector.
Let's talk a bit about the cruise tourism industry now, because that has basically been at zero since they closed down last year. There have been no cruises in or out of anywhere, but some are now either they might have started already or are looking to start to resume operations. Is Jamaica ready to receive cruise ships?
Well, Jamaica is being made to be ready. And also the crews have to be ready to come to us. So we've been having discussions. We've been looking at a very, very robust set of protocols, taking some from what the CDC says. But Jamaica has had its own very, very strong protocols in relation to cruise activities. And if you recall, at the start of the pandemic, we were literally leaders in insisting on certain elements of the protocol, which had us in a little, crosshairs, if you will, with our cruise partners. But we prevailed in the end because they understood, what we were doing and what we were saying. So now that there is an ambition to restart cruise, the discussions are resuming, and we have very, very, very detailed, I would say, protocol arrangements that the crews are going to be required to comply with. And also the crews themselves have got to require certain things of us, which, is the normal way that it goes. So we, at the moment, are very cautious because we have to be. The problems that emanated here, if you remember, started with a cruise ship in Montego Bay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we're very careful about that. And I think health is too. So we want to assure the country, and I'm happy for this opportunity, that all the necessary risk elements that we can identify will be carefully examined and efforts made to minimize and mitigate. So
Is there a date yet for Jamaica to receive its first cruise ship?
Well, the hope is for August 1 date for the start. We're working hard on that. It is felt that around that time to September might be appropriate, and that's where our thinking is at the moment.
And at the same time, your ministry is also actively lobbying to become a cruise tourism home port for which of the cruise lines? Remind me which line you're lobbying
Well,
with,
there are
Minister?
two that are now on the cards who have actually made applications for it. One is the Norwegian Cruise Lines, and they have actually come forward with an itinerary plan, and we're discussing now the details of the health protocols for engagement.
Wait, so they've made applications to
The port authority
pass here, to stop here, but for Jamaica to be the home port for them?
to be the home port.
Two cruise lines
to
want to
home
home port here in Jamaica.
Absolutely.
Norwegian and
in
who?
Montego Bay, the Norwegian and the Viking.
Oh.
Now the Norwegian, I think their crew and cruise passengers will perhaps amount to just about 3,000 in the first instance. But they would come into Montego Bay with some level of overnighting, and then they would commence their itinerary in Montego Bay and make a stop in Ocho Rios. And then from Ocho Rios, they will go on to Cozumel and possibly Roatan, and then back to Montego Bay to send off that group by air and to receive the next group that comes in for the itinerary to recommence. Then there's a second itinerary that the very same cruise line want to have out of Montego Bay as well. And that one would go to, again, Ocho Rios, and from Ocho Rios to the ABC Islands and back to Montego, and the process repeats itself. For the Viking, I think that's a very ambitious move because this one is engaging all Jamaican IT. So what would happen is that the cruise would start in Montego Bay, it goes to Falmouth for a day, then it goes to Ocho Rios, similarly, and it goes to Port Antonio, similarly, and then around to Port Royal, similarly, and back to Montego Bay, and then they return to their homes, and a new set of cruisers start the itinerary. That one is exciting because
that's an unusual itinerary too. Is it that some of the other islands haven't opened yet to cruise?
It was the first of its kind for Jamaica. We are excited about it, but it also involves quite a bit of logistics, and we're engaged a bit, in the discussions about that one in particular. Because if we can get it right for that, then we would have something of a blueprint for the entire cruise resumption.
That's very interesting. But I do wonder why it is that they would want to have all these stops in Jamaica. Is it that other islands haven't yet opened up to cruise?
Well, because Jamaica is an exciting multi-destination destination.
Good answer.
And we are one of the few countries in the Caribbean, in fact, the only one that has so many ports of call with shore excursion experiences that allow for this kind of. It's amazing because in every area that you go in Jamaica, you can get different experiences. But the Montego Bay experience is not the same as Falmouth. And, we just finished the artisan village there. And that's going to be a real game changer in terms of the merchandising and also production capabilities of our artisans and, craft traders.
No, but Minister, seriously, how do you differentiate? Because I know you're making the case that Montego Bay is different from Falmouth, is different from Ocho Rios, but I think there's a lot of similarity amongst those three as well. I can understand the difference with the excitement of going to a Port Royal. That certainly is a different cultural experience than going to the North Coast, where you're going to be encountering the same jerk chicken, the same reggae music, lots of the same types of craftware. How do you differentiate and make that an exciting
Now, that's a good
trip?
question because you're right. It's a single culture with all the key elements. However, what happens is that each area in Jamaica, somehow it's about the people and what they emphasize in the same cultural mix that we're talking about. And also the way in which much of their heritage assets are preserved and retained. You go to Falmouth, for example, and you get a Georgian experience. You don't get a Georgian experience in Montego Bay, and then when we are finished theming the artisan village, for example, they will go back to what the whole plantation system offered there, and also mythologies around like the Martha Bray and stories about Jamaica's oral history and so on and so forth. So Falmouth will offer something a little different. When you go to Ocho Rios has the signature Duns River Fall, which offers a different experience to begin with. Then you have the Mystic Mountain experience and a number of other such, man-made.
But those three locations are so close together that if I'm a tourist, hold on, Minister, those three locations, Mobe, Ochi, Trelawney, are so close together that if I'm a tourist, you're basically booking the same tours from either of those locations.
Right. No, I don't think you're wrong about that. It's just that when you are now looking at a port of call for an extended stay, not now for an hour. And the three destinations, you're right, because of their proximity, could be covered in these 1 hour, 2 hour stops. But here you're now talking about a day where you can explore the hinterlands of Trelawney, for example. The cast topography there and the experiences in the cockpit country is not something that you get everywhere. You don't certainly get it in the Montego Bay area. Even the agricultural produce that you have and the way in which the cuisine is organized, textured, prepared, and so on. All of that is different. So I think that there is definitely a point of differentiation within the areas. But you're right that in the generality of things, it's a single culture, and we are also very closely geographically connected. So it is a challenge for us, yes, but it is not something that we don't have the capacity to provide. But in terms of the other destinations, maybe and just maybe, I think Belize probably might have the opportunity because of the richness of the biodiversity and also the fact that you are larger and connected more with land borders and so on. So chances are the influence of their neighbors have come over to enrich the culture and changes how the experiences can be.
Well, I'm from Belize, so so I would advocate for that in addition to
island
Jamaica, of
states are
course.
different. Island
Right.
states are different in that, all we have is what's around us and then the maritime experiences. But
Right.
to the point, however, Port Antonio is a different experience. It's an absolutely different experience. And Port Royal, of course, is unique in so many ways. So Jamaica does have that variety that will enable a multi-destination experience for visitors.
And you said these two cruise lines, Norwegian and Viking, approached Jamaica?
Yes, indeed.
So you didn't have to go lobbying for them to come here. They wanted
No,
to come here and make
let
this
me
their
tell you
home
what
port.
happened, of course, is that with the CDC's attitude to cruising out of the US ports, all the cruise lines were left idle for over a year. Different cruise companies have different capacity to deal with this lockdown, and the cash crunch is heavy and hard. And so innovation had to come in. And that's how, they've looked around to see, okay, where could they home port with minimum of difficulty? And one of the big requirement was airlift facility and the proximity to the U.S. market. And Jamaica has perhaps more airlift arrangements out of the United States than any other country in the region. In fact, DOMREP probably is closest to us in that regard. So we have access to more than 220 gateways in the United States. And then we have the ports, and we have product that is well known and well recognized. So Jamaica literally offered itself, for them to think about. And they did, and came to us to say, okay, we think that, and a point that I didn't make, Kalilah, is the geographic location in the North Caribbean, that we are the midpoint, if you will, between Caribbean and elements of mainland Central America and South America, so that from Jamaica you could go to Cozumel in Mexico readily, and you can also go to Honduras on the Central American mainland, and then you can from here then you can go down to Aruba, Curacao, and the ABC Islands. So,
and let me tell you, I've been to Cozumel. Cozumel has nothing on Jamaica.
I know.
And that's speaking objectively.
Thank
But
you.
the point you made about the airfare, not the airfare, the air passenger load, the airlift that Jamaica has is an important one. And the airfare as well, because that's a challenge that a country like Belize that you mentioned would have. They don't have as much airlift, and it's very expensive to travel between Belize and the United States. The plane fare between Miami, Jamaica, for example, much, much, much cheaper than Belize to Miami.
Yes,
so that's
indeed,
an advantage.
indeed. So I think those good attributes, if you will, played well in our favor. So they thought Jamaica was the right place. And we're excited about it because, the value of cruise tourism is not that it provides as much foreign exchange as the the overnight accommodation sector, but it has what you call immediate convertibility, so that as the ship gets into the port, the dollar starts to flow in the pockets of the ordinary Jamaican immediately, because they use the local transportation. They go and they buy from the local vendors. They go to your attractions and so on. So, and they do the shopping, in your duty free shops, as the case might be. And your craft vendors have a good opportunity to peddle their wares. So, this is the value of it. It's immediate cash into the hands and the
Absolutely.
pockets of the ordinary Jamaican. That's very
What
important.
do you think that this home porting here is likely to be temporary until things change in the United States? Because the majority of the visitors are still coming from there, and it's still cheaper for passengers to fly to Miami than to fly to Jamaica.
Well, I think that it could be temporary because the Viking, for example, is for 3 months in the first instance, and so will RCL. And of course, when the world opens up, um, you have to change to benefit from what is the most effective and efficient way to operate. We hope that some level of home porting will continue here, because we already have the AIDA from Germany that home ports in Montego Bay. It comes in every weekend. They fly in from Europe and they go into a Caribbean tour straight from Montego Bay. So we could encourage, and smaller vessels, 3,000 and less, to take on that possible position of home porting. But Kalilah, home porting is very important for us for so many other reasons, and that's why we would want to try to encourage a continuation of it. Because one, it allows a lot of local people to be employed, as crew. Secondly, it provides opportunities for supplies of various types of services and commodities. Um, to begin with, they will have to bunker the ships here, so that's fuel, and they would need water, and that's very important. And then, of course, the agricultural supplies which we could provide, and whatever other beverages and liquors and spirits that Jamaica may produce. Our rum is first class, and not calling any name, but I think our beers are top class too. So I think there's the opportunity for that. Then it also helps us to develop capacity for what you call accumulators in the business, and the whole logistics, of dealing with movement of goods, storage, and so on. So there's a possibility for value added there, and for jobs to be
Right.
created, more jobs to be created. And
It's
then
definitely a
when
good opportunity.
it is, and then when the plane comes in, then you have overnight stay, and those are again spenders who will move in the town
More
and
traffic to the
more
airports.
traffic. That's
Yes.
correct. So that for us is a good way to restart the cruise industry in Jamaica.
So those two would be looking to start around August, September too?
Around August, yes. I don't want to hear September, but who knows? And everything, of course, in the final analysis will depend on how we are managing the pandemic, of course, and how we can all comport with the protocols that the health has. And it's very important. We are managing here lives and livelihood.
Right. Well, we are all watching along with you, Minister, because we all know how important the tourism industry is to Jamaica's overall economy.
Right. But might I say one more thing, Kalilah, before
Sure.
we break? I think investment in tourism is perhaps the greatest statement of confidence that we could hope for in a recovery. And I don't know anywhere else, certainly not in the Caribbean, that we could see $2 billion of direct investment in the creation, building, and capacity engagement. I believe that to see nearly 7,000 new rooms coming on board in a very strong, positive, and determined way, not now Kalilah suspects or even light prospects, but actual money that is on the table, construction that have started in a number of areas already, acquisitions that have been done by way of land and approvals that have been given. And I can see that what it is saying is that even in a pandemic, Jamaica's product is so strong. Jamaica's enabling environment is so appealing that $2 billion US of investment can be made at this time. It will bring nearly 20,000 new jobs into the Jamaican space, and of course, the ripple effect in the rest of the economy will be significant.
That's
So I
2
wanted to
billion
make
being
that
made over
point.
what period of time?
The next 2 years.
Mm.
We're starting now. There's a 2,000 room hotel that has actually started in Green Island in Hanover from Princess. We have, when you drive into Lilliput area of St. James on the Rose Hall Main Road, Elegant Corridor, you will see already fenced up property bought by the Hard Rock for the Hard Rock Casino and Cafe, 1,700 rooms there. The H10 in Coral Springs in Trelawney is currently building out 440 rooms additional, and that has started. Sandals has announced their 950 additional rooms from.
Well, it's all very, very good news, Minister.
So you see, it's happening, and that augurs well. But to make sure that the investment is not born out of any sort of light considerations, we already have, and I think no other destination in the Caribbean except Dumrep and of course Cancun would have more than 800,000 seats lined up for the summer season. And Jamaica has 850,000 air seats lined up for this. And that makes a big point that the market is responding. Bookings are looking good, and we think that we should see an August that is about 70% of what we had in 2019.
That would be good indeed if those projections materialize. But like we said at the top, a lot depends on the vaccination campaign
Absolutely.
in the various markets. Thank you so much for joining me, Minister.
Thank you, Kalilah.
Up next, we've got your market recap, and the analysts are standing by. This segment of Taking Stock was brought to you by Bulwark Insurance Agency, Insurance Made Easy, and Massey United Insurance. How good is your insurance?
Time now for your market recap, brought to you by Sagicor Investments. Think wealth, think Sagicor Investments. The Jamaica Stock Exchange advanced, with the combined index gaining 1%. 107 stocks traded across both the main and junior markets of the JSE for the week ending Friday, April 23, 2021. 51 advanced, 36 declined, and 20 stayed the same. 102 million shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, totaling $517 million. After just listing on the Junior Stock Exchange last Friday, future energy source company Fesco traded the most, taking up 19% of market volume, with people buying and selling nearly 20 million shares in the company. The stock was also second among last week's biggest gains, gaining 25 cents to open the week at $1.05. Wigton Wind Farm ordinary shares traded the second highest, with people buying and selling nearly 14 million shares in the company. The stock lost 2 cents to open the week at 63 cents. And the Trans-Jamaican Highway rounded out the most traded, taking up nearly 13% of market volume. The stock remained unchanged to close last week at $1.68. Now let's see who had the biggest gains. Knutsford Express Services stock price rose 40% to close last week at $8.92. And rounding off the biggest gains, Salada Foods Jamaica stock advanced 24% to open this week at $6.48. On the losing side now, Consolidated Bakeries Jamaica was the biggest loser. Its stock price went down 14% to open this week at $1.51. Epley 7.5% preference shares due 2024 was second on the list. Its stock price down 10% to open the week at $6.25. Rounding off the biggest losers, Margaritaville Turks, losing nearly 10%, down to $28. Market Recap was brought to you by Sagicor Investments. Think wealth, think Sagicor Investments.
This segment of Taking Stock, The Analysts, is brought to you by Ideal Portfolio Services. Welcome back to Taking Stock. I've got a team of analysts to examine the week in business. I'm joined by Wealth Advisor at Ideal Portfolio Services, Dwayne Taylor, and Research and Strategy Analyst at Sagicor Investments, Jodianne Aris. Hi, Jodianne. Hi, Dwayne. Welcome back.
Hi.
Hey.
So let's start with Fesco because it is now the most recent entrant to the junior market. It has listed on the junior market of the stock exchange on Friday. How do you guys think Fesco is likely to perform on the markets because it was a very small offering?
Typically with the small offerings, you normally see a big, uptick or a big demand, upon listing. So we expect that Fesco would have done similarly. I know it's at IPO at 80 cents. I think you can probably expect, or we would have expected to see some amount of movement closer to $1 thereabouts in the initial first day of trading, just on the basis that it was heavily demanded. And when you look at the allocation, you would have realized that probably quite a bit of persons who wanted exposure to that sector may not have been able to achieve it based on, the size that they wanted based on allocation. So there should be demand going in for that one.
What do you think, Dwayne?
I piggyback on what Jodian was saying. Normally for these small uptakes, we find that the stock price does skyrocket, especially within the first 2 to 3 days, as persons are really trying to maybe capitalize on whatever capital gains they would have been able to get from the market. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the price skyrocketing even beyond the $1 region, maybe into maybe $1.20, $1.30, just based off of demand. So, yeah, man, excited to see how it progresses. More or less, it will hit the circuit breaker. So we just have to see how it progresses into the week.
There's some news on the economic front that has come out recently. The jobs numbers, Jodianne, I know you always follow those very carefully. What are the jobs numbers telling us?
News coming from labor market. We're seeing where unemployment rate is actually down is 8.9%, and if you compare it to the latest figures that we had for October 2020, which was about 10.7%, now at January 2021 we're seeing those figures at 8.9%. So we're seeing an improvement over a COVID period time, and so that brings about some positive sentiment. I mean, it's still below. It's still higher than the lows that we have seen. So if you compare it to last year, January 2020, it would be higher, about 1.5 percentage points higher around that figure. But it's still improvement over the COVID period, because you'd have imagined that, we'd have hit, during the heights of COVID in July 2020, we'd have hit an unemployment rate, of 12.6% after having done a period of going into single digits unemployment rate, and so we're back there. So we're getting some positive news. I'm also seeing that some of the females are stepping out of the labor force, and I think that could be linked to the fact that we're now going through a period of, somewhat homeschooling, if you could say, with online learning. So you may find that, females being primary caregivers, they sometimes tend to step out of the labor force in order to provide that sort
Meaning
of
those are the ones who
caregiving.
say Meaning those are the ones who said that they're not looking for jobs right now.
Right. So they have stepped out of the labor force. If you look at the sectors, you still see the same sectors that are heavily impacted by COVID. The accommodations, food services, the creative sector space, that are the ones that are showing the heavier declines. within labor market participation, just on the basis of the nature of COVID and the impact that this has had on entertainment and hotels.
That point you made about women leaving the labor force to take care of responsibilities at home. I read an article in the week, I think it was in the New York Times, about small businesses in the United States being unable to find labor. So now they have the jobs available. They're trying to
Yeah.
resuscitate their businesses, and nobody wants the jobs because they're benefiting in the States from the unemployment checks, and they feel like they're earning more from unemployment than being able to actually go and work a job. So that's an interesting point. But what industries do you see locally recovering the fastest based on the data?
Well, thus far, I think you see probably in terms of like food services with a little bit more opening up, you may see more, especially when you have a little less restrictions, you may see persons doing a little bit more in that space.
And you see something
Even
like an ends coming on board too.
right. So I mean, if it is that you have your delivery services, then I'm more likely able to produce because then I'm able to meet the market. So I mean, I can meet you at home as opposed to anticipating that you're going to come to me. And so you may see some pickup in areas such as those that were, initially shut down as we go into more probably looking forward to as we get more vaccination done, that they may have some not as great a restriction on dining in. You may see a little bit more opening up in that sort of space, whether it's a little bit more restricted like whether two persons for a table or anything like that. But as we go along and we see rolling out a vaccination and we see a little bit more allowing for inclusivity or allowing for persons to interact, you may see growth in that space in food services.
Right. And based on a conversation I just had with the Minister of Tourism, Ed Bartlett, we're looking at some improvements in tourism job numbers coming up probably around late summer, so August thereabouts. So that should be good. Dwayne, let's take a look at what's happening on the international equities markets. I know you're eyeing one in particular, but before we get to Johnson and Johnson, do you see anything that grabs your attention as to what's going on with the expected economic recovery?
Right. So what we would have noticed over the past 2 weeks or so, a lot of the indexes took a bit of a dip. Dow Jones, S&P 500, and that was partly due to the announcement from President Biden about the hike in capital gains tax rate. Now, this was something that he had mentioned from campaigning days, that this was something that he had planned to do. And for persons that might not necessarily understand the concept, it's pretty much they're treating any capital gains on equities as like a regular income. So you're going to be charged pretty much an income tax on whatever gains you make on the stocks if it is that you opt to sell. Now, persons would have had some hesitation towards that because naturally people look at investing as an outlet to earn additional income outside of the regular 9 to 5, or if they're entrepreneurs, whatever income that they generate. So with that hike, it offers some concern to investors, but at the same time, we shouldn't be too surprised because this was something that was always in the makings and it was just a matter of time for it to be implemented. So that's why we would have seen a bit of a slide. Amongst other things, obviously coronavirus is still very much prevalent overseas, and as things progress, the market tends to be acting very reactionary to whatever news comes out. If it's bad news, you find that stock prices are trending downwards. But as we get some positive news, it will pick up. So it's very volatile, very reactionary to whatever news that comes out. But I think that's why it's so important to look at the fundamentals of the company. Because if it is that they're fundamentally sound, then really whatever fluctuations that we do see in the market, there wouldn't be too much of a deterrent to invest in companies overseas. So a lot of things happening, a lot of knee-jerk reactions, but overall, I think the U.S. market still has a very positive outlook just based off of the companies that are there.
If I'm a Jamaican or a Caribbean citizen and I'm invested in U.S. equities, does that increase in the capital gains tax affect me?
Well, absolutely. So it's really just on any form of U.S. investment. So if you hold those equities, well, as a Jamaican or a Caribbean citizen, it's a bit harder for an individual to necessarily own stocks overseas. They tend to make the process a bit difficult. But if it is like you go through an entity that holds those equities, the tax would still be charged at the source. So once it is that you purchase the share, the tax will be charged at the source, and you would just get whatever is left back from there.
But you there at Ideal facilitate purchasing US equities, right?
Right.
So I would still have to pay the tax through whoever you hold it through? How does that work?
Remember, so for taxes like that, it would be taxed at the source, So it's not something that we can necessarily control to say, oh well, we can circumvent this. This would be something that would be pulled directly once it is that we opt to sell. So it's not necessarily something we can control. Yeah. So once it is that you opt to invest, the capital gains tax rate is going to be applicable to you.
And what's the new rate?
I think it's supposed to be about 39.6%. It's a bit high. Don't quote me on it, but I remember the last article that I read. It was a bit high. Yeah.
CNBC says proposal 39.6%, but Bloomberg says as high as 43.4%.
Right.
Exactly.
It varies based on your income.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think
But
that's really the higher end that would probably see a steeper increase for their. So it's not that flat rate for everyone.
Yeah. Are capital gains taxed in Jamaica?
No, we don't.
But dividends are taxed, but not capital gains, right?
No. Yeah.
So, Jodianne, when you look at the international markets, what are the movements that you're seeing that are catching your attention?
I think one of the things in the US market is that it's very reactive to news. So, I mean, you don't really see a delay, when things happen. I think, you saw a bit of, downs in the last 2 weeks. However, if you look at just this week alone, it's just been very exciting. I mean, the market was down probably the first 2 days. And then on Wednesday, you would have noticed that, there's been some a bit of resurgence just on the basis of anticipated recovery. And so you saw uptick in like a lot of travel stocks. So if you look at the airlines and the cruise lines, and even some train, options, you would have noticed increases there, while even like if you look at tech, which has been popular for a lot in 2020, I mean, there's still volumes there, but in terms of the price movements is not as high as they were before. You've seen a little bit of flat movement for some and a dip for others. And then on Thursday, when, news of the capital gains would have, the tax on capital gains would have been a little bit more popular, or, seem like it's becoming a little bit more of a reality, even though it was announced before. You notice that there is no fall off in the market. So the market is very dynamic. It's very volatile. And you notice that people are using different information, and that information is fueling how it is that persons are moving within the international space. So we notice, on anticipation of recovery is one of the themes that is centering around in terms of investing in the US market, as well as expectations for inflation. I mean, are centered, are pushing, are fueling some of the activity that you see in the market.
Let's zoom in now on the company that you're watching this week, Dwayne. That's Johnson & Johnson. Their profit has blown past the forecasts. Give me the update on Johnson & Johnson.
Right. So for Johnson & Johnson, as you can imagine, they've been in the news lately for not a lot of positive things,
The vaccine, yeah.
Exactly. Situation surrounding their vaccine and the rare blood clots that they found in, I think about 6 individuals. And then there was also a report about some of the vials that they had through some manufacturer, about 15 million being contaminated. So not a lot of positive things going on for them in the news of late. However, their results came out recently. They submitted their SEC filings, and what we noted is that they saw a huge bump up, a huge increase in sales for the first quarter. It was roughly about 7.9%, increasing from 20.6 billion to 22.3 billion. So it's very positive for them in the sense that we see their operations are still booming regardless of the negative things that are happening around them. It was most notable that the increase came in their medical devices and pharmaceuticals on the international side. So when we look at that, we realize that regardless of what has been happening, as much as it is important to note, they are performing well. And actually, on Friday, they should have met with the CDC and the FDA regarding the ban that was placed on the COVID vaccine. And a lot of the notable figures in that sphere, I think even Dr. Fauci had spoke out saying that he does anticipate that it will be lifted and they will continue further distribute the vaccines both in the US and also in Europe and South Africa, I believe. So the outlook is positive for Johnson and Johnson this year. They've shown that they're still fundamentally strong. They're still increasing. Their operations are still increasing in scale. So I do anticipate like a strong year for them, despite whatever may come up. A lot of big entities in the overseas market, they always have some sort of negative news. It's just to see how they manage it and what they're actually doing in the operations to determine, if this is a company worth investing into or watching. Yeah.
How's the market reacted to that news with the vaccines and the blood clots, Dwayne? How's their stock price doing?
So the stock took a bit of a dip in last week and also early this week, but it actually went up about midweek. So and that's what I'm saying. It's just so reactionary because normally you would think that, boy, this type of news would lead to the stock price possibly plummeting, but it was just a marginal dip in price that they had experienced. I think even as of today, there would have been a slight dip, but it's nothing significant to say, oh my God, the stock price has plummeted. It's still relatively stable. And with the news of their actual financials, the projections for the stock price are actually in the 200 region. So, I mean, it's still positive.
$200 and change. Where is it now?
It's at roughly 162, 163, around that ballpark.
So, like you've always been saying, if you believe in the fundamentals of the company, you will watch the fluctuations, the daily fluctuations.
Numbers don't lie.
Just to add though, for Johnson & Johnson, one of the things is that they really do have a diverse segmenting. So it's not that they're just dependent on one area. And those are companies that we generally recommend. You want something with diversification. So if there's impact on one side, there's still something else happening on the other side that can buffer or boost in that area. And I think they also have a lot of specialty drugs. So they're really price makers in some of the segments of the market. So even though they may be having issues with a COVID vaccine, I mean, on the other end, some of the products that they have and that pipeline that they have working on is still strong because they are somewhat price makers in those segments. So it's a positive outlook for Johnson & Johnson.
Well, thanks, Dwayne. Thanks, Jodianne, for the update. Always appreciated.
Pleasure.
No problem. You're welcome.
This segment of Taking Stock with the Analysts was brought to you by Ideal Portfolio Services. That's our show for this week. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share with a friend. Also subscribe to our newsletter at KalilahReynolds.com and turn on those post notifications so that you can be the first to see all my other features. We want to help people learn more about money so we can all get this money together. This week on Money Mondays JA, what's holding you back from starting your investment journey? You might actually be thinking about it all wrong. I'll take you through some common misconceptions about the stock market. And on Money Moves JA, is your business at the point where you need an investor? How do you attract one? And what are investors looking for? I'll tell you how to get your business investment ready. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Kalilah Ray and follow at Taking Stock JA on Instagram. If you want to connect with the analysts this week, check the description box below for their contact information. Also visit our website, KalilahReynolds.com, for financial information you can use however you like it. Watch, listen, or read. Now, tell a friend about taking stock. Investing is the new sexy. So let's make it cool to talk about money. I'm Kalilah Reynolds. Stay safe.
Let's get this money.